Hey AI, where are my results? In this episode, we take a look at some of the fundamental principles to getting results for your business using AI.
Welcome to ClickAI Radio, where you'll learn the secrets to transforming your small to medium business. Grant has been helping businesses transform using technology for over 30 years. Advanced technologies like artificial intelligence have been available only to large companies and advanced technical teams. Grant will discuss how you can use to leverage AI and other technologies to grow your small to medium business. As a gift, Grant is offering his ebook, AI for Sales Growth, at clickairadio.com. Now, here's your host and biz tech geek, Grant Larson.
Hey, this is Grant. Welcome to another episode of ClickAI Radio. All right, so I've been thinking about this issue around AI and the ability or inability of businesses to get the results from their AI efforts. So I'm going to quote here again from Bernard Maher's book. It's called Artificial Intelligence in Practice. He actually points out something interesting. He's got a series of use cases, or case studies, I should say, with their various use cases where AI has been applied and what some of the outcomes or the results of those are. I'm just going to pull from one of these here. This was a Kimberly Clark experience where they were looking to produce some AI insights based on their customer data. All right, so customer segmentation problem. How do we go after the market and try to improve our targeting with our marketing efforts and use AI to understand where to go with that? So what they did was, as they applied the AI, they ended up increasing their sign-up rates by 17%. And then they ran some other campaigns to optimize targeting of customers. This was for their Dipende brand, and they saw a 24% increase in conversions. So how did they do that? Well, they did it mostly by producing content that more closely aligned with the customer profiles that the AI predicted would be more responsive. So this is a great use case here, right, in terms of applying AI to this sort of marketing problem and customer segmentation area. Now, these customers, what they also found was that they ended up becoming more likely to be long-term repeat buyers. So it's one thing to have an increase in conversions and sales, but to turn them into longer-term buyers, that's a real bonus, certainly. It also had the downstream effect of making them more likely to give positive recommendations to friends and family. So this is a great example of successes for AI, right? It's a great use case for where we would apply it and the kinds of sort of long-term benefits that we want from AI. Of course, what we're finding is more and more market-leading companies are transitioning into tech companies. And if we're not thinking of becoming a tech company, it actually continues to move to our disadvantage. So it's essential that we do that if, of course, we want to be competitive and even stay ahead of the pack, if you will. But it turns out that AI-driven analytics is a lot more powerful than the traditional business intelligence solutions that were out there previously and still certainly in use today by a lot of organizations that are focusing, of course, on customer segmentation. But the real point is, by applying AI ultimately into the space of doing customer segmentation, the AI is able to see things, of course, that difficult for our brains to get wrapped around. But it also has another impact that we're seeing, and that is that the businesses that are competing, of course, as our businesses each compete in the pool, in the talent pool, and the challenges we face at this time of, I'm producing this at the beginning of 2022 when we've got a lot of not only supply chain challenges, but resourcing problems and a lot of competition for talent in our businesses. Building our business in tech-savvy ways and leveraging the technologies such as AI, of course, to help us to be more competitive. Those also tend to attract a certain type of talent to our companies also. So it's an important part of building our representation, our reputation, and our branding. But I want to talk about the other side of it, right? So that sounds like, roses and apple pie and motherhood and so forth, right? Everything's great. Turns out, of course, as we all know, AI's had its failures. But I found a particularly interesting view of this from the IEEE.org site. They were describing some AI failures. And it's interesting as you look at the different set of failures typically, it seems to be a lot in some of these areas where there's, AIs being used in these use cases that are pushing the edge and the envelope, which of course is what we should be doing for our R&D. But when I think about AI, my focus is more on how can I apply it to benefit my business, right? To improve my customer service, to increase my revenues, my profitability, my efficiencies, and so forth. Well, it turns out that a lot of these are fairly R&D centric use cases that the IEEE sort of points out. Not surprising, given that it's IEEE, but I'm just going to point out some of these, right? And then take hopefully point out some takeaways. Number one was brittleness. They felt like AI is quite brittle, especially this was in a computer visioning use case. And that as the world of the imaging kept changing, then they had to do a lot of AI rework. So brittleness of AI models in some use cases, that's a true statement. So is that a failure? Well, it might be, I guess, right? Depending on your use case. Number two, the embedded bias problem. I touched on that earlier, especially when I was having a conversation recently with a couple of the organizations that I've done some interviews with. So I'm not going to drill more onto that. This is something that we have to be mindful of as we're building our AI models to help our businesses. Number three, catastrophic forgetting. That's an interesting phrase right there, catastrophic forgetting. And here they point out the whole deep fake problem, right? And here they're discussing how bad actors in the market who are doing this deep fake work and organizations trying to compete against that, the constant retraining of AI models to include not only new deep fake techniques, but also the need to deal with previous and older styles of deep fake. This certainly is critical. Is it a failure? I don't know. I kind of look at that as the cost of doing business conceptually, right? That if we're in that world where we got to keep figuring out which we do, how to address this deepfake problem. But nevertheless, AI models are, if you don't include the data in your retrained model, then yes, it can quote unquote forget old stuff. So it's not like our cognitive brains where, well, I guess it depends how old you are, then you don't forget things as humans, right? Okay, number four, explainability. This is a challenge with AI. And in particular, it's a challenge as it relates to giving explanations for results and predictions can sometimes be difficult to do, right? Where there's some of these questions and predictions that come out are hard to explain how it is that this was arrived at. And as a result, I'm going to give a suggestion on this here in a moment to help address some of this stuff. I think explainability is a real challenge for us. So is it a failure? It's a challenge for sure. Number five, quantifying uncertainty. So, hey, here we go. Once again, having sufficient data sets that deal with fringe or edge use cases is critical. This is I guess maybe a failure in the sense that sometimes as humans we don't do that and we focus on the happy day scenarios, but turns out our brains in real life have to constantly be dealing with all the other fringe cases as well. So it does put the onus on us as business owners to make sure that we're collecting as wide a set of data as possible. And that not necessarily means more and more data. It means more coverage of the different use cases of data out there that we have. Number six, common sense. This was a failure the IEEE was pointing out. Common sense, meaning turns out AI lacks common sense. Sometimes us as humans lack common sense. In any event, the ability, of course, to reach some logical, acceptable conclusions, right, based on our vast understanding and context of everyday knowledge. Lots of times we take that for granted, and well, AI doesn't really have that, at least in our current maturity levels of AI. We just don't have that. As such, I think one of the things that I've seen and how I tend to view it as I work with organizations is this AI stuff really should be looked at as augmented intelligence. So the bottom line is, do not throw your brain away, right? This stuff is this AI stuff, yes, we should look at it as it's going to be bringing insights, but we should challenge it, right? And so when it comes into us with some insights, we should look at it in terms of the realm of possibility as well. Turns out one more, number 7, in terms of failures, what IEEE was pointing out was math. They said, well, look, simple number crunching tends not to be handled so well with AI. So in addition to not throwing your brain away, don't throw away your old calculator, right? Or, of course, all of your old, sequential linear software, right? That's doing real stuff today, running your business in the economy and such. So AI's got its place, and these 7 quote-unquote failure areas, I think I think there's some techniques that we can use to get around some of it. Not for all of it, but some of it. But what that does is it pushes us into a set of use cases where, we can still get AI value. So to get the best insights from your AI, I think the net is somewhere in this area. Letter A. I decided not to do a number 1. Letter A. Define your crisp questioning, right? Which drives focused AI model preparation. So it means we gotta think about the business and not about the technology as we're organizing what we're gonna go do with AI. That has to happen. B, not number 2, but B, I guess. Here we go. B. So when it comes to data, be prepared to continually add to your data set and rebuild your models. This notion that, build it once and it's done kind of a thing, that needs to go away. And then C, use AI like an augmented intelligence tool, as I pointed out earlier, right? So use an AI platform as part of this that can take your feedback to influence the AI model. You are the brains, all right? And so as you're getting some insight or predictions on things to do, be sure to come back and inform what was the impact of that. Was it positive? Was it negative? Did it do what we expected? We need the AI models to continue to be informed and learn from this. All right, so AI does a great job identifying insights on correlations, of course, that are difficult for our brains to see, but we should review it as business owners within the context of our business, right? We got to keep that in mind and evaluate the veracity of applying that insight to our business. I had to get the veracity word in there. It just sounded intelligent. Look at the can we actually take this insight and apply it to our business, right? And that's really what we're after. Not just to have the the aha moment. Oh, that's great insight, but hey, can I make some concrete adjustments that's going to change my business and actually bring some benefits about? So AI, when it's approached right, using the techniques that I mentioned above, my experience is it really can help our business. But the industry is also gathering context on the failure scenarios. And so, of course, we're going to be best served if we take that into consideration. No doubt about that. So I was looking at something else here, medium.com. You can find some interesting blog articles and such out there. And it pointed out, okay, let's say that is there a single point of failure for AI? And I found this to be an interesting point that was made here on this particular piece here. Is there a single point of failure for AI? And there's this blog on medium.com that suggests there is. And as I reviewed it, I thought, interesting. So this piece suggests that to get started with AI, you should not choose a company-wide AI implementation, but rather a proof of concept that gets the company accustomed to the new normal, right? In my experience, the new normal includes the following activities. These are going to sound like the ABC items I just mentioned. I'm going to use 1, 2, 3 now just to switch it up. Number 1, All right, the new normal. If you're going to go apply AI, think about doing these things. Number one, clarity in the questions, the business questions you're seeking from the AI. Sound familiar? Number two, data curation. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you got to have forethought and organization on your data. And of course, its potential relevance to the questions you're asking. And number three, a mindset of iterative AI model refinement over time. All right, so I think I've said those three things several ways in this episode. All right, so let's get to the point of this particular piece here. Is there a single reason for AI project failure? And you hear all sorts of stats out there, right? Oh, maybe half of the projects fail, or some say 85% of the projects fail. Is there a golden thread? According to this particular blog or article, they say yes. And the answer is expectation management, right? So organizations have, of course, said amazing things to me about what they expect from their AI. This has to be managed early in the process. So I agree with this sentiment, right? It's certainly not as quantifiable, right? It's not to say, oh, the common point of failure is you didn't have clean data or enough data or whatever. Certainly the best practices are we got to have that data and et cetera, et cetera. But expectation management is really an interesting point on that, and I agree with that. As I've reviewed this, thought about this, right, I've developed a guide for smart steps to business outcomes with AI. If you're interested in that, reach out to me at ClickAIRadio.com. Just join my email list. I'll make sure you get that to you. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining. And until next time, manage your AI expectations to achieve the results which are there to benefit your business using AI.
Thank you for joining Grant on ClickAI Radio. Don't forget to subscribe and leave feedback. And remember to download your free ebook. Visit clickairadio.com now.